Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and whispering woods, lived a curious boy named Eliot. He wasn't strong like the blacksmith's son, or fast like the baker's daughter, but he had something no one else did: a wild, uncontainable imagination. Eliot lived with his grandmother, Nana May, in a cozy cottage that smelled like cinnamon and old books. Every evening, while the stars blinked awake in the sky, children from all over the village gathered by their fireplace, eager to hear Nana May's storyous tales of dragons that danced in the clouds, invisible kingdoms beneath flower beds, and secret rivers that flowed backward through time. But one chilly autumn evening, as golden leaves danced outside the windows, Nana May fell ill. Her voice, once strong and sweet, had faded to a whisper. The children sat quietly, waiting, their eyes round with hope. Eliot looked at his grandmother, then at the expectant faces, and then something magical happened. Eliot stood up. "I'll tell you a story tonight," he said, heart pounding like a drum. "It's one no one's ever heard before." The children blinked in surprise. Eliot had never told a story. Not one. But they leaned in, and Eliot took a deep breath. "Once there was a squirrel named Tobias," he began, "who wasn't like other squirrels. He wore a tiny blue scarf and dreamed of flying." The children giggled. "Tobias built a hot air balloon made of spider silk, dandelion fluff, and one very large leaf. He soared over gardens and rooftops, waving to astonished cats and grumpy crows." The room filled with laughter and wide-eyed wonder. Eliot's words danced like fireflies, flickering pictures into the minds of everyone listening. When he finished, the children clapped, cheeks flushed and eyes sparkling. "Another one!" they cried. "Tell us another, Eliot!" And so, night after night, Eliot told stories. A girl who made friends with a storm cloud, a toad who composed symphonies on lily pads, a library guarded by a polite ghost who rearranged books in alphabetical order. With each tale, Eliot's confidence grew, and soon, not only the children, but their parents came too. Even the mayor snuck in once with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. But Eliot wasn't just making up stories. No, each night before bed, he would tiptoe into the woods, past the sleeping trees and rustling bushes, to sit under the ancient story tree. No one else knew it was there. The story tree had a trunk as wide as a house, and roots that hummed gently when you touched them. Its bark was covered in symbols and scratches, like forgotten letters from long ago. But the most magical thing of all were its branches filled with glowing, floating orbs. Each orb was a story, waiting to be told. Eliot would sit beneath the tree, close his eyes, and let a story drift down into his heart. He never knew what would come. A dragon, a whispering well, a spider who painted with stars. But every tale was a gift. Then one night, the story tree spoke. Not in words, but in feelings and colors and ancient warmth. "You are the story keeper now, Eliot," it seemed to say. "But one day, the stories will fade, unless you share their magic." Eliot didn't sleep that night. The stories weren't just fun tales, they were alive, and they needed to be remembered. So he decided to do something no one had done before. He wrote them down. Every evening, after telling his stories to the village, Eliot scribbled into notebooks with worn pencils and ink-stained fingers. He drew maps of make-believe places, sketched his characters, and wrote every twist and turn. Word spread. Travelers came from faraway lands to hear the boy who invented bedtime stories. But Eliot always smiled and shook his head. "I didn't invent them," he'd say. "I just listen." Years passed, and Eliot grew taller. His voice deepened, and his hair grew curly and wild. But every night, no matter what, he visited the story tree, listened, and shared. One day, a royal messenger arrived on a horse with golden reins. "The queen requests your presence," he said. Eliot blinked. "Me?" In the grand castle, the queen explained that her son, The young prince couldn't sleep. Night after night, he tossed and turned, chased by nightmares. The court doctors had no cure. Eliot nodded and walked softly into the prince's chamber. He sat by the boy's bed and whispered a story. A brave little mouse named Oliver, who lived inside a cuckoo clock and explored the world one tick at a time. By the time Eliot finished, the prince was fast asleep, smiling. The queen wept. "How did you do that?" she asked. Eliot smiled gently. "It's the story, not me." That night, he was given a title, Royal Storyteller of the Realm. But Eliot never let it change him. He still returned to the village, still wrote by candlelight, and still visited the story tree. Until one morning, many years later, the story tree whispered something new. It was time to pass on the gift. So Eliot gathered the village children, now grown with children of their own. He shared his notebooks, his secrets, and even the path to the hidden grove. And when a girl with freckles and untied shoelaces named Mira told a story about a talking pancake who solved mysteries, Eliot knew the magic would live on. Eliot became old, his hair like snowy clouds, his voice soft but steady. He still told stories, but now he listened more. And every time a child laughed or gasped at the perfect moment, he smiled, knowing bedtime stories would never die. Because once upon a time, a curious boy listened to a tree and shared what he heard with the world. And the world never slept the same way again. Moral: stories are not just words, they are bridges, dreams, and stars in the night. And sometimes all it takes to change the world is a boy brave enough to tell one.